Okay, get ready, because we're diving into a story that's just wild. It's got a king who's desperate for an heir, these mysterious sages with some, like, mystical solutions, sibling rivalry that gets really dark, and a twist that I absolutely did not see coming. Seriously, this one had me hooked.
You know, it's amazing to me how this story, even though it has all these fantastical elements, really gets at some really deep human themes. Like, how far will we go to get what we want? And how jealousy and insecurity can just eat away at families, even the most powerful ones.
So, to set the scene, we start with this super powerful king who has, well, everything except an heir to his throne. He's tried everything, but nothing seems to work. So finally, he turns to the Jewish community. He's like, I need your prayers, and I need the wisdom of your sages.
It's interesting, isn't it? You have this king at the very top with all the power in the world, and he has to turn to a community that was often seen as, well, different, marginalized even. I think it just shows how universal these basic human desires are, you know? How even those in positions of authority can find themselves searching for answers in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, it's like he's admitting that his power has limits, that there are things he can't control. And get this, it works. After he goes to the first sage, he's blessed with a daughter. And not just any daughter. This girl is described as intelligent, beautiful, skilled in the arts. I mean, everything a parent could dream of.
Except, of course, for the one thing he's fixated on.
Yeah.
A son. And in a world where your lineage, your inheritance is everything, it's a big deal.
I know. It always makes me wonder, was her birth really a blessing? Or was it just a constant reminder of what he didn't have? Like, it creates this tension right from the beginning.
Absolutely. And you see that tension play out when, even with this incredible daughter, the king is still consumed by this need for a son. He goes back to the Jewish community and finds another sage. This one, though, offers him a very unusual solution. We're talking precious stones and some kind of mystical potion.
It's like something straight out of a fantasy novel. I can just picture the king's expression when the sage's like, here, drink this potion made with precious stones and you'll have a son. But, desperate times, right? He's willing to give up half his kingdom for this chance.
Yeah, it really highlights the king's obsession. It's not just about having an heir. It's about having a son who fits this very specific idea he has in his head. And it makes you think about what happens when people get so focused on one thing. You know, what are the consequences?
Well, he gets his wish. A son is born. But then things get a little strange. This prince, who is supposed to be made of precious stones and mystical potions, just looks like a normal baby. No glowing skin, no magical powers, just a regular kid. I gotta admit, the first time I read this, I thought, wait, that's it?
Right. We're all set up for something extraordinary, and then the story kind of flips it on us. It makes you question what we even mean by ordinary and extraordinary. Maybe the real miracle is in the everyday stuff, the things we take for granted.
Oh, I love that. It's like this story is challenging us to not get so caught up in the fantastical stuff that we miss the beauty of what's right in front of us. But not everyone sees it that way, especially the princess.
Can you imagine? You're the center of your father's world, his pride and joy. Then suddenly you have a brother. And not just any brother, one who's prophesied to be made of precious stones.
It's almost like she needs him to be something more, something otherworldly, to justify why her dad is suddenly paying so much attention to him. And then it happens, the prince cuts his finger, and guess what? A precious stone pops out.
Yeah, it's like proof, a confirmation of the prophecy. But instead of calming the princess down, it just makes her more jealous. It's like the potential she sees in him is a threat to her place in the family.
I think we've all felt that, haven't we? Maybe not to this extreme, but that fear of being replaced, of becoming less important to someone, it's a powerful feeling. And for the princess, well, it leads her down a pretty dark path.
She finds a sorcerer and uses a curse, a really powerful one, to make her brother sick. And we're not talking about a little cold here. This is a serious illness that's meant to weaken him, to take away his vitality, his potential.
And what's even more disturbing is how much she plans this out. It's not just a spur-of-the-moment thing. She does her research, figures out how to make the curse as strong and unbreakable as possible.
It shows how deep her resentment runs, but also how clever and determined she is. She's not just a victim in all of this. She takes action, even though it's driven by these really destructive emotions.
Of course, the king is freaking out. He tries everything to heal his son. Doctors, other sorcerers, anything he can think of.
Right.
But nothing works. So at a last-ditch effort, he goes back to the Jewish community and calls for the sage who helped him have his son in the first place.
It's interesting how they portray the sage in this story. He's not just some magical problem solver. He's deeply religious, constantly praying, questioning God about why this prophecy hasn't come true. He's struggling with his own doubts and faith, which I think makes him a much more complex character.
Right. He's not just a stereotype. He feels real, relatable, even though he has this very extraordinary role.
Exactly. And it's this sage who figures out what's going on. He realizes that the prince's illness isn't natural, it's magic. And he knows how to break the curse.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. The sorcerer who cast it has to be thrown into water.
Whoa, that's a big reveal. It's like the story takes a sudden turn, and now it's not just about the king wanting an heir, it's about what can happen when those desires get out of control. It's a reminder that ambition and jealousy, especially within a family, can lead to some really bad things.
And it sets us up for a really tense scene. The sage confronts the king, the princess realizes she's been caught, and she panics. She tries to get the curse back herself.
Which, of course, leads to, well, let's just say things take another unexpected turn. And we'll have to see how it all plays out in part 2.
Yeah, stay tuned, because what the princess does next has consequences that no one, not even her, could have predicted. Okay, so we left off with the princess racing towards the water, right? She's got to get that curse back before anyone else figures out what she did. But in all the chaos, she slips, falls right into the water, and, well, let's just say the curse is broken.
It's like, I don't know, almost too perfect, right? Her own actions, the things she did out of fear and desperation, they actually end up being what saves her brother. It's kind of like a classic be careful what you wish for situation.
It really makes you think about how we can't always control the outcomes, especially when we're making choices based on negativity. And sometimes those consequences, they can hit you when you least expect it.
And just like that, the prince is healed. It seems almost too simple, but I think that's part of what makes the story so interesting. There's this sense of something bigger at play, like fate or destiny is guiding things, even with all the human drama happening.
Yeah, totally. It's like the universe itself is trying to get things back on track, to push towards a specific outcome. But the story doesn't stop there. Remember that prophecy we talked about? Well, it's about to come true in a way that's both pretty spectacular and super symbolic.
Okay, I have to admit, I did not see this coming at all. So the prince is getting better, and his skin starts to peel off, and underneath, well, he's made entirely of precious stones.
It's such a powerful image, right? This prince, who everyone thought was so ordinary, suddenly becomes the most literal example of hidden potential. It makes you wonder, are we too quick to judge people based only on what we see on the outside?
It definitely turns the king's whole obsession with appearances on its head.
Yeah.
You know? He was so fixated on having a son who looked the part, and the story is like, no, true value is about what's on the inside, the stuff you can't always see right away.
And it's not just about looks. Remember, each of those precious stones is supposed to have special powers, unique qualities.
So is he like Superman now? Can he control the weather or something? I need more details.
Well, the story leaves some things up to our imagination, which is actually one of the things I really like about it. It doesn't spell out every single power he has. It just hints at the fact that he's not just extraordinary on the outside, but also on the inside now.
It's like the story is giving us permission to fill in the blanks, to think about what could happen with this kind of transformation. It makes me think about all those hidden talents or passions that we might have inside ourselves, but haven't discovered yet, like our own personal precious stones.
Exactly. What would it take for us to shed our own limitations, those doubts or fears that hold us back, and let our true potential come out?
And what kind of challenges might we have to face to make that happen? It's a cool thought, right? Because this isn't just a story about a prince. It's about how we can all grow and change and become something more.
And keep in mind, this transformation wasn't easy for the prince either. He went through a horrible illness, was betrayed by his own sister, almost died. It's almost like he needed those tough experiences to push him to become stronger, more resilient.
It reminds me that sometimes the hard stuff in life, the stuff that pushes us to our limits, can actually help us grow. We have to face our weaknesses and find that inner strength that we maybe didn't even know we had.
It also makes you wonder about the princess. I mean, her plan totally backfired, but what happens to her now? Does she have to pay for what she did, or does she get a second chance?
Yeah, that's a good question. The story doesn't shy away from how awful her jealousy was and the pain she caused. But it also suggests that maybe she can change. Maybe she can learn from her mistakes and find a way to make things right.
I think the story leaves that open on purpose, It makes us think about what real responsibility looks like and if forgiveness and healing are possible, even after something this bad happens.
It definitely adds another layer to the story and makes us consider how complicated people can be. We're all capable of both good and bad things.
And don't forget about the king. He got what he wanted, a son who fulfills the prophecy, but at a huge cost. His daughter betrayed him, his son suffered terribly, and now he has to face the fact that his own obsession might have blinded him to what really matters.
I wonder if he learns anything from all this.
Yeah.
Does he realize that he was wrong to focus so much on having a son?
Yeah.
Or is he just relieved that the prophecy finally came true?
Yeah, that's another thing the story leaves us to think about. But it definitely serves as a warning about getting too caught up in ambition and how important it is to see the value in the people around us, whether they fit into our expectations or not.
It's like the story is really making us look at ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what are we obsessed with? What are our blind spots? What are we putting first in our lives? And is it worth it?
And it goes beyond just our own personal stuff. There's a lot in this story about society as a whole. Like the king being so fixated on a male heir, it shows this deep-rooted bias towards men being in charge, which is something that's been around forever and honestly still exists today.
It really makes you think about all the amazing women throughout history who were ignored or pushed aside just because they weren't men.
Yeah, and even the princess's jealousy, as messed up as it was, shows how much pressure women are under to compete for attention and power in a system that doesn't really support them.
It's crazy how these stories, even though they're like fairy tales, can tell us so much about real-life struggles, even within families. But let's go back to the prince for a second. What happens to him after this transformation? Does he become a great king? Does he use his powers for good?
Well, the original story doesn't really tell us. Just like with the princess and the king, it kind of leaves things open-ended. It ends with the prince transformed, his potential unlocked, and this feeling that amazing things could happen.
So it's like the story is throwing the ball back in our court.
Right.
It wants us to imagine what comes next, how this prince, who was seen as ordinary, can now use his extraordinary abilities to create his own future, maybe even change the whole kingdom.
Exactly. It's like we get to become storytellers ourselves to keep the story going and find our own meaning in it. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this story. It doesn't give us all the answers. It leaves us with questions, possibilities, and this invitation to really think about its deeper meaning and how it relates to our own lives.
Yeah, it's like it's saying, here are the pieces, now go build something amazing. And that's pretty powerful, right? It's telling us that even when things are tough, when we feel overlooked or underestimated, we still have the power to change, to show our true selves, to write our own stories.
And it reminds us that change isn't always easy. We might have to go through some hard stuff, face our fears, confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather hide. But like we saw with the prince, the payoff can be incredible.
It's a good reminder that we all have hidden depths, things we're capable of, that we might not even realize. Sometimes it takes a bit of a push, some pressure, to bring out that brilliance that's inside us.
So as you go about your day, think about this story. What are your own precious stones, and how can you let them shine?
And don't forget, you don't have to do it alone. Find people who can guide you, who can offer wisdom and support. Sometimes the best way to unlock our potential is to connect with others, learn from them, and find inspiration in their journeys.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a really interesting look at a story that's both magical and really thought-provoking.
I agree. It reminds us that there's always more to discover, both in ourselves and in others. And that even when things seem dark, there's always the possibility for transformation, growth, and the discovery of something truly extraordinary. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep shining.